Jeff had shared with you earlier today, my name is Kevin Lynch, and I am president of Lynch Development Associates. Our firm has been in business for 23 years, specializing in just working with Catholic parishes, schools, dioceses, Catholic healthcare institutions, and looking at their fiscal and structural and ministerial needs and being able to address them in the form of stewardship campaigns and capital campaigns. In that time, we've raised over $1.5 billion and been able to maintain a success rate of 98% of reaching our goals. And one of the reasons why that we feel we've been successful has been because we try to look at your parishes from a strategic standpoint. One of the things that drives me crazy about my business is that my phone rings numerous times a month to say, "Hello, Kevin." "Yes, Father." "Our roof just fell in. We need to do a capital campaign." Now, I'm more than happy to help Father fix his roof, but I think there might have been some indicating factors prior to it that it may have been in a little bit of trouble. All right? And one of the things that I become concerned about, and especially as a previous board member of the International Catholic Stewardship Council, is that when we are receiving, whether it's the time, talent, or treasure of our parishioners in our parishes as gifts to the parish, they are expressing their gratitude to God for all of the gifts that they have in their lives, we are responsible as leaders in the church to be able to utilize those gifts responsibly. Okay? We have inherited buildings from previous generations. We have inherited schools. We have inherited healthcare institutions, all these wonderful things of ways that we can serve towards helping build the kingdom of God here on earth. God bless you. And what we really need to be able to do is to start to utilize strategies and strategic planning in order to make sure that we're being good stewards of the gifts. Because otherwise, what are we saying to those who give to us? Your gifts aren't that important. Okay? Your gifts aren't that important. For the past 2.5 years, our firm has been working in the Archdiocese of St. Paul, Minneapolis, helping parishes get out of significant debt. Now, as you know from the papers, that they've had significant difficulties in the Twin Cities with regard to the bankruptcy, okay, with regard to sexual abuse crisis and all of these terrible things that they've been going through. But one of the things that had happened when we were first approached by the Archdiocese was to help with these parishes, was that they had about 30 parishes total having over $60 million in debt. Okay? Third-party debt. It was owed to, not the Archdiocese. Who was it owed to? Third-party banks. And that they had taken out significant loans, and some of these loans were taken out 15 years ago, and the parishioners were giving every single week to the offertory, and all the parishes were doing was paying the interest-only payments on the loans. Does that sound familiar, Father? Okay? Okay. We need to talk to Father. Okay. But the thing, all I could think of is when I literally went into the first meeting with the director of development, and I looked at the list, and I was like, these parishioners must be tremendously angry, right? Think about how hard we all work as lay people out there supporting our families, doing all these different things, and ultimately what's happening is that if the parishes that we're in are not good stewards of our resources, they are giving them, and all it was doing was basically coming into the offertory basket as a tax-deductible donation, but coming into the offertory basket and going right out to pay the bank, and really having little to no impact on the mission of the church. All right? And that really started making me think even more about strategic planning for parishes. Before I came into this industry, I graduated St. John's University in New York, and as many young men in New York do, I went out and I got a sales job. And I got into pharmaceutical sales where I was able to sell drugs legally for a living. Okay? And for a few years, I received a great deal of sales training. But one of the things that has stuck with me from that sales training that has been very applicable to my work in stewardship and development has been one training class which talked about personalities and different types of personalities that you deal with in working with people. Okay? And this is just, there's actually a whole day seminar on this, but I'm going to give you like the 5-minute version if you don't mind. All right? But they basically start out talking about this axis of personalities and how people are, okay, and what they are. And up top on the left-hand side, we have the analyticals. The analyticals. These are the people on your finance committee that do everything by the numbers, right? You can't have a conversation with them unless you're discussing numbers. It has to make sense to them, okay? I have to be able to check it off. Show me the numbers, right? Show me the facts. Tell it to me. Make this plan look appropriate on paper, because that's the only thing I actually read is paper, all right? Over here you have the driver, you have the expressive, and you have the amiable, okay? Now, in absolute contrast to the analytical is the expressive. Lori and I tend to be a little bit more expressives. She's an amiable expressive, okay? I am over here according to the test, right? The person who comes out and talks to you about mission, right? Talks to you about vision. I can paint you a picture about where your parish is going to be in 5 years that'll make you get up and dance like the guy in the video. All right? Because that's what an expressive does. They come into the room, they bring a lot of energy to it, and some people who are expressives will then walk out of the room and suck all the energy out with them. Okay? But expressives talk about mission and vision. All right? And that's another personality that's going to sit on your pastoral council or your finance council or your stewardship council. Up in the upper right-hand corner here is your driver. It's all about results. And they're the person that says, that sounds like great. Let's make sure we fix the roof and we do the parking lot. We're going to do that. When are we going to get that done by? What date? Right? When? Yesterday, right? We want to go by yesterday. We want it done by yesterday. The driver personality is the type of person, why isn't that done yet? You know, the expressive is still talking about how beautiful the parking lot's going to be, right? And how wonderful Mass and the liturgy is going to be because the roof is no longer leaking. The driver's wondering why the contractors aren't on the roof already, all right? And that's another personality that you're going to deal with in your committees. The amiable is the trusting individual, okay? And that's where you need to build relationships. What's your first name? Tricia. I have to spend some time, I'm assuming Tricia's amiable just right now, but I have to spend some time with Tricia. I have to make sure that she trusts me in conversation. I could give her the biggest vision in the world, but I could also just be an incredible salesperson in her mind, okay? Okay? With the driver, the amiable feels like they're going a little bit too fast for me, right? They're going a little bit too fast. I need to build trust in this plan. I need to understand where we're going. I want to see how it impacts others. All right? All of those things. All these 4 types of personalities are sitting on your committees. And the reason why I share this with you is because when committees get stuck in a quagmire where they can't move, it's because they're not communicating with each other based on the personalities that they have. Okay? If the expressive is still sitting there going, but when we have a brand new parish center, it's going to be absolutely beautiful. And the analytical's going, did you see the numbers per square foot, how much it's going to cost to build? And the expressive's not listening to the analytical, you get nowhere. Okay? So from a strategic planning standpoint, what I just wanted to bring to light is when you think about talking to someone else on their committee, just take a moment based on their conversation, if you can, to assess who they are and how to speak to them. Okay? If I go in and I meet a pastor who says to me, Kevin, by the way, it's April. We want to be able to do some work over the summer in the sanctuary of our church. And I'm sitting there going, when did you have this idea, Father? Last week. I decided that we were going to redo the sanctuary of the church. Okay? He has no bids, right? He has no plan. All he knows is that summertime's a good time to do it because the church is a little bit slower. We don't have many weddings booked at that particular time, and it's a good chance for us to be able to do it this summer. Okay. Now I know that in that conversation, I could tell him all about the analytics of the money, right? I have to tell him a little bit about the analytics of the money, but if I don't link that back to when he gets results, he's not going to want to have that conversation with me. Okay? So you have to kind of think about that as you do your as you have interactions amongst your committees. Now, Jeff, could I grab lights so we could go back to the thing? So the reason why I share that to you is just so that this way, I hope it just kind of points out to you today that the importance of communication and interaction with your parishioners is try to assess who you're speaking to and why you may get stuck into different situations with your parishes. Because if you can't break through those different barriers, it makes it very difficult to make progress. The other thing that happens is that if you do start to recognize who the other person is, your relationship with them will grow. Okay? My wife is much more of a driver. I'm much more of an expressive. Okay? She takes a list out every single morning. The woman makes a list every morning. And if that list isn't completed by the end of the day, there's chaos. All right? So I know that at the end of the day, if she's going through her list and I'm sitting there saying, hey, what are we going to do this weekend? Right? I know that if she's not through that list, I can't communicate with her yet. There's no way. She's got 3 things left on her list to do. Right? So you have to know the people that you're interacting with. Now, a couple of things there's been some significant shifts in the Catholic Church since I started my business in 1994. Okay? In 1994, when I first started going into parishes would be like, well, it's time to do a campaign, and there was no need to really do feasibility studies or things like that to do stuff. You just kind of went into it and you got the people behind it and things were going. But then I started to see a shift in the late 90s and into the millennium where all of a sudden you started to see changes in the church. So let's talk about what our reality is from a national perspective, okay? And what we've noticed is that there's been a significant change. From 2000 to 2010, the Lilly Endowment conducted a study which was trying to take a look at basically emerging models within the Catholic parishes within the United States. So let's talk about some of the things that they discovered. In 2015, just to give you a guideline from the past couple of years, there was an estimate of about 81 million Catholics in the United States. The estimate is that by 2050, it is estimated that there will be 128 million Catholics in the United States. Now you're probably sitting there saying to yourself, then why are we having such challenges in having people attend Mass if there's so many people? This is significant growth, and the estimate is based on a good deal of Latino immigration into the country because that's been a big part of the expansion in the Catholic Church. In 1960, there were over 35,000 diocesan priests nationally. Okay? 35,000. By 2020, there will be less than 15,000 diocesan priests in the United States. Okay. Now, this doesn't take into consideration religious orders, but the attrition rate is very similar. In 2015, there were only 515 ordinations throughout the entire country. For the priests in the room, close your eyes for a minute. Present estimates indicate that 6 priests either die or retire for every one that is ordained. Okay? Either die or retire for every one that is ordained. If I had that attrition rate in my staff, in my business, where would I be? I'd be in a crisis mode, right? I would be in a significant crisis mode. How do you plan for this? How do you prepare for this? The one thing I've noticed, and I will say this, I have loved my career in the Catholic Church. I have loved the fact that I went to elementary school, Catholic high school, Catholic college. My parents are Irish immigrants who came to this country and proceeded to have 10 children. I don't know why, but they had 10 children, right? And we all went to Catholic school, and our Catholic faith has been a part of our life throughout the entire time. The thing that pains me is that I see this change. And I know that we need to do something about it. The problem is what I've learned is that the Catholic Church is a reactive organization, and we're not a proactive organization. We wait for things to happen to us many times rather than going out and trying to change the results of it. Okay? If I was losing this many potential employees, let's just use the term, what would you have to do? You'd have to develop an aggressive vocations plan in order to try to find new people. And there's different ways to do that, and the church is trying, but you can't do, what's the definition of insanity? Doing the same thing over and over again and expecting a different result. Okay? And that's what the point that we're at, is that we're so ingrained in our historical kind of patterns of what we do, that if we don't start to think a little bit more outside of the box, we're never going to be able to grow our church and engage people in our church. We want people dancing on the lawn with us, right? We want more people there with us, shirtless or not. No, but the idea is that you really want to have more people, and we have to start to think about ways to engage the community. Here are some other statistics. In 1965, there were 17,637 parishes. I don't know if people are aware of this, but we had a big boom from the 60s in actually building new communities and new churches around the country. And then we went up to 19,331. Right? That was a big boom. That lasted till about 1998. By 2015, we were down to 17,300 through consolidation. Okay? And through consolidation, closings, things like that. And because there are shifts that are happening in Catholics transplanting from certain areas, there's a generational component where some of our best parishioners and donors who come to Mass every single week are now either retiring or passing. Okay, so there's an attrition rate as far as our parishioners are concerned there. The vast majority of Catholic population growth is coming from the Hispanic population. If we do not find ways to strongly communicate and embrace the Hispanic population growth in the United States with regard to Catholicism and invite them into our parishes, the Hispanic populations that are here, they are, for many parishes, the future of their parishes. Okay? And it's something that's a significant challenge because ultimately we're not being proactive in inviting them. There are parishes that have Spanish Masses. They absolutely have a Spanish Mass. But what I will say is those communities are what? Many times divided. All right? I will go into a parish and I'll sit there and I'll sit down with a finance committee and there'll be 7 white males on the finance committee, okay, that are all 60 years of age or older, and they'll say, well, Mr. Lynch, can you tell us how do we get the Hispanic population? We have a Spanish Mass here. They don't really give to the offertory very well, all right? But, you know, they make up about 20 to 30% of our parish now. How do we get them to give? First point they're asking is, how do I get them to give? And my first point to them is, how about inviting them to the table? Okay? How about inviting them to have representation on the finance committee? How about having representation on the pastoral council? Things like that so that they feel as if they're being invited into the parish. Hispanic families in the United States have an average of 2.3 children, while our Anglo families, the Irish, the German, the Italian, are only having approximately 1.6 children. Okay? When people say to me all the time, what is the impact of contraception and pro-choice environments? This is a potential impact that we've seen in the Catholic Church that we don't talk about very much. Okay? Even the Anglo families that were my parents who had 10, right? I have 4. My one sister has 6. We're trying to do our job, all right? We're trying to help out, right? But the fact is that the average family in the United States has 1.6 children. Do you know that if a culture gets down to 1.3, it is impossible to reverse that number and make that culture viable again? Did you know that? Economically? In Italy, the average family has 1.1 children. Same thing in Spain. In France, it's 1.3. Eventually, those cultures will disappear because they cannot, and they don't talk about it, but they cannot, from an economic model standpoint, reverse the trend. Because if 2 parents only have 1 child, and they marry someone else and they only have 1 child, there's 1/4 of the people going into the workforce in the second generation down. Okay? This is a true issue for us as Catholics, okay? And that's why you find that these are things that we should be talking about of the impact of pro-choice, the impact of contraception, those different things in the church. But we don't discuss it in that way, all right? And that's one thing that I think needs to be addressed. How about a chart? So here is a chart that the Lilly Endowment put together that'll show you the net change in parishes in the United States from 2000 to 2010. In the green, these are the places that they're actually building new churches or new parishes. So over here in the Southwest, right, in Texas, what do you think this represents? Hispanic immigration, right? And that those parishes, there was a parish that we worked with in Austin, Texas, that within 10 years went from a 90% Anglo parish, 10% Hispanic, they went to 40% Hispanic, 60% Anglo within a 10-year period. Okay? That's a significant demographic shift. But if we look over here, you see this here? Why are there churches being built in the Southeast? The retirees. All your faithful Catholics are heading down Route 75 and 95 in the Northeast, and they're heading south. And they're going down there and they're saying, gosh, it's warmer down here, right? And they're getting settled into their parishes or and all of a sudden their churches are full and they can't accommodate them, so they build new ones, okay? And that's what's starting to happen down there. But where are all those donors coming from? See that? The red is, this red here, this is the Northeast corridor, right? The old Catholic belt is what they used to refer to it as, right? Going out to Ohio. Here, this red shows that within the past 10 years, these states have lost between 100 to 250 parishes. Okay? In the orange, this representation is 50 to 100 parishes in those respective states. Okay? Now, if any situation that you're in was, if you're looking at this, and keep in mind that there'll be times that I'm not talking about things from a spiritual perspective, I'm going to talk to you about them from a business perspective. From a business perspective, this shows to me this is some trouble, right? This shows to me some trouble, right? If you think about it from a business standpoint, if you're a franchisee, right, and you have franchises, well, our franchises in the Northeast are in big trouble, right? And the money that used to be coming to them is now going down south. So, let's talk about this from a standpoint of stewardship. And this is why when we do training of all of our directors, we talk about stewardship as a fundamental part of everything that we do, as not only as a firm, but even as individuals. We talk about stewardship to our employees and make sure that they're understanding it. Not only that, we're hoping that they're living it. All right? 4 principles of stewardship are to receive God's gifts gratefully. Lori made a point in her talk, which is simple. Think about this for a moment. Of everything that you have, your home, your cars, your children, everything, all of that is a gift from God. All of it. And you own none of it. It's all God's. It's all God's gift to you, so that this way you can actually utilize those gifts and develop those gifts responsibly. Whatever gifts you have. You are not just asked to do it, you are called to do it. Right? You are called to develop those gifts responsibly. And making sure that in responsibly developing them, it means that if you've taken parishes, when I came in today, I saw on St. Joseph's Cornerstone, one side it said 1884, and I think the other side it said 1984. Okay, I think there was a cornerstone there for its 100th anniversary. Think about the history of sacrifice, commitment, faith, love, service that has happened in all those years. You have to develop the gifts that have been given from others responsibly. To share them lovingly in justice with others. You're not supposed to hold on to those gifts. You're supposed to share them. And you're supposed to make people aware of them. Okay? I've had this conversation numerous times with people that are saying, they say to me all the time, you know, we just can't seem to get anyone to come to Mass. And I say, okay. And they say, I said, so what are you doing about it? Well, you know, we put stuff in the bulletin. The bulletin is probably one of the most unread documents in the United States. Okay? If you want to communicate with people, the bulletin is something that they read for a couple of minutes maybe in the pew if you give them out before Mass. If you give them out after Mass, it's something on the floor of the car that doesn't quite make it back into the house. All right? So you have to make sure that you're sharing all of these gifts lovingly with others. We have to make people aware. And one of the things that happens is, and I said this one day with one pastor, he said to me, he said, you know, Kevin, he says, oh, my parishioners, they know all of the ministries. So I made him a bet. He said, they know all the ministries that are here in the parish. I said, okay, I'll make you a bet, Father. Because we knew from the feasibility study that we had done that people were not really engaged as far as ministry is concerned. So I said, what we're going to do is we're going to ask one of my directors to stand outside of all your masses this weekend. And he said, and he's just going to take a poll. Could you please tell me the top 3 ministries at this parish? The people couldn't answer it. And I brought him back the poll. And they said, most people answered 1, some answered 2. Now he claimed that they had 40 ministries in the parish. And the people could not answer them, which means that people are not sharing those things with them, right? You're not sharing those ministries. There's a core group of people who may be aware of it, right? But we're not sharing them with our communities. And that's necessary to do. A conscious return to God with increase. This is one of the toughest things for Catholics to get. I've talked to many elderly parishioners who'll say, in conversations, they'll say, well, I've been putting $5 in the basket for the past 40 years. You know why? Because Father Mike told me back in Brooklyn that you have to give at least $5 a week. So I follow what Father Mike has been telling me. That $5, 40 years later, right? It's a very different thing. To challenge Catholics, here's the interesting thing. We talked about it a little bit before. If you ask Catholics, what's the Catholic Church always asking for? Money. Then why are we the worst givers of any religion in the United States? Did you know that? Of any of our other religions, we're the worst givers. Because we nickel and dime people. We hit them over the head with little things. Buy a ticket. Come to a dance. Okay? We nickel and dime them rather than having them embrace the concept of the give your gifts gratefully. Your giftedness, what God has gifted you with, the idea of your giving is your expression of gratitude to God. And if you know that God's grace and God's gifts to you, you can never, right? He cannot be outdone. How do you stop giving? How do you stop giving? Because if you embrace stewardship from that standpoint, most people give from their excess, not from their substance, right? I've paid all my bills. This is what I have for the church. I have a friend who's Mormon. Him and his wife talk about this all the time. And she wasn't quite on board with the whole Mormon tithing thing as much as he was. And we were out to dinner, my wife and I were out to dinner with him one night, and he said, he says, yeah, you know, Anne-Marie's just not on board with the idea that the first check I write is 10% of my income directly to my church even before I pay the mortgage. If Catholics did that, I'd never be in business, right? So there would be no need for me. So let's talk about this from what do we do from a strategic planning standpoint. Individually, do you have a long-term plan for retirement? I hope so, right? Do we have a long-term plan for our children's college? I have 4. You bet I do. Okay? Have a long-term plan for paying off our mortgage. I know the month and the year that my mortgage will be paid off because I plan to do that dance that you saw earlier. Why don't we have a long-term plan for our parishes? Most parishes go fiscal year to fiscal year, doing the same thing over and over every single year, and going, made it through this year, right? Okay? Why don't we have a long-term plan? We have to be goal-oriented, all right? You must be goal-oriented. And one of the most things that's important about being goal-oriented is accountability. Hold yourselves accountable. As stewards, we should be holding ourselves accountable to the gifts that we have been given by God, to the gifts that we have been given by others within our parishes, okay? Every parish should have a short-term and long-term plan for strategic planning. 1 year, 3 year, 5 year, and 10 year goals for your parish. You must have them. Because otherwise, the old term of life is happening to you, right? You're not actually living your life, but life is happening to you. That's what's happening to our parishes. We're waiting for things to happen to us that we can react to. So it's important to annually review these goals, see what you've accomplished, and refocus your efforts. Will there be some failures in here? Absolutely. There are going to be things that you're going to try to hold yourselves accountable to, and you're going to say, we just didn't get it done in the time that we originally thought of. Fine. Is it still a priority? Refocus and get it done next year. All right? Because it's important to. It's essential that these goals are shared with the entire parish community. Many of our parishes might have ministry booklets to share with them people what ministries you might have. Why don't we have mission booklets and statements and materials? Okay, those are really important because that's where the core message begins to be shared with your parish community. Who you are, where you're going, what you are doing, all of those things. So, whenever we look at any parish, when we're looking into parishes, there's 6 areas of planning that we look at for your parishes. Okay? There's 6 different areas. And here's what's interesting, and we'll see this in the workshop this afternoon. Okay? They are all interchangeable in the sense that they all rely on one another to be successful. To be a successful parish, you are striving to be strong in these 6 different areas. Spiritually, liturgically, ministerially, fiscally, structurally, and socially. Those 6 areas, because a healthy parish wants to be striving to be as good as they can be in all these areas. Now, strategic stewardship. My thought process for developing a way of communication within a parish is that you have a strategic stewardship committee, and there's representation from different areas of your parish that are critical to helping make decisions for the future of the parish. There are too many times that there's a finance committee meeting, that the finance committee makes a decision that impacts the pastoral council, and neither one of them was at either meeting, right? It's a little crazy, lack of communication. So what our suggestion is with regard to developing a stewardship and leadership committee, which has, from the spiritual standpoint, representatives of your pastor, associate pastor, retreat leaders, anyone involved and engaged in the spiritual life of the parish, and especially the pastor as the shepherd of the parish. Okay? Liturgically, a liturgy committee representative. I cannot tell you that in many of the feasibility studies that we do, the areas of challenge that we hear in the parish, 60 to 70% of them are usually liturgical. Oh, the music is terrible. Okay? Or the homilies. I had to sit with a pastor one time after the study and said, Father, I'm trying to help you with this. There's all these results as far as the campaign is concerned and what you're going to be doing, but I should make you aware that most people don't appreciate 20 to 25-minute homilies. Okay? And you're having problems with, like, the next Mass coming up and there's not enough parking in the parking lot and there's all this chaos that's been created. Is there a way that you can share the point of what you want to share from the gospel, but just abbreviate it a little so that the guys out in the parking lot aren't killing each other trying to get cars in and out for the next Mass? Okay? Liturgical committee representatives are important because here's what's interesting. Lori made the point in her presentation when people say, I don't want to go to Mass because it's boring. If you're doing the same thing, if you're not looking at your liturgy honestly and seeing, are people singing? Okay? No, they're not singing. Why? Why aren't they singing? Are we singing the hymns that people know? Is there some way to bridge them into new hymns? Should we be able to turn around and have people who are, maybe at the beginning of the Mass, before we start the procession, we practice one new song, and we do that so that this way the parishioners get used to it. And now we introduce a new hymn, right? And that's where a liturgy committee representative can start to help strategically in how to enhance your liturgies. Ministerial leaders. I'm going to talk about this a little bit later, a ministry leader representative, because the lack of communication between ministries in parishes in the United States, you're all stepping on each other. You walk out into the narthex of a church and you sit there and the Rosary Society selling flowers. the youth ministry selling tickets, and you're wondering why nobody's coming over to buy a ticket to the dance. Because you're selling them 3 things at once, right? There's no strategy to what you're doing from a ministerial standpoint, all right? So the ministry leader representative that we think that you should have one person coordinating your ministries is critical to communication. A social coordinator representative, having someone who's going to talk about new and different social events. My parents went, when we grew up, I grew up in the Bronx, right? And so I grew up 3 blocks away from my parish. My parents' social activities that they went to were all at our parish. Okay? But the one thing where that was wonderful, and they went to the same, most of my neighborhood growing up was, in one house there was an Irish brogue, the next house there was an Italian accent, the next house there was an Irish brogue, it was just that type of immigrant community. And so we had 2 major big dances, which was always interesting, was St. Patrick's Day and Columbus Day, all right? But what was interesting is the way that they coordinated them was all of the Italian families went to the St. Patrick's Day dance, and they taught them dances and different things like that. And the St. Patrick's Day dance, the Irish people went to Columbus Day to teach Irish people actually how to make good food. So that was the balance. That was the balance. But then having a finance committee member who sits on there, because there's someone who has to bring some clarity to the numbers for how you're strategically planning your future. And then a buildings and grounds committee member, someone who's looking at the structures of the building. I've been to parishes where there have been, I'll say to the pastor, and he'll say, oh, it's great, I have $1.5 million in the bank. But the whole plant is falling apart, right? He's obviously a big analytical person who's just saying, I love building the bank account, but the plant is falling apart, and he doesn't have many ministries that he's invested in. That's not healthy either. So you want to make sure that these people reside on a committee. This committee can help you to develop your strategic plan, have communication with the other committees and people within your parish. They're responsible for bringing that message back to them, bringing their ideas back to the committee, and helping you to develop your strategic plan. So let's talk about some different areas and some examples of activities that you can do. On the spiritual side, I'm not seeing as many days of reflection in parishes, okay? Saturday, Sunday after Mass, something during the week for retirees, days of reflection. And we think that our thing is don't overdo it, but at least have them twice a year, have a theme to it, have something that you're trying to accomplish, whether it's a Lenten one, one in the fall prior to Advent, something of that, and keep that going, because it's important. If you want to build the spiritual life of people, it's not just going to be through the liturgy. One of the challenges that we have in the Catholic Church, and one of the reasons I believe that people are not attending Mass as much, is because they don't understand the gift of the Eucharist. Okay? And that's the bottom line. They don't understand what the gift of the Eucharist is, and we have to try to help bring them closer to the Eucharist. You want to focus constantly, when you're discussing even on days of reflection, about stewardship as a way of life, about gratitude, generosity, all right, service, those different things. An annual spiritual mission, most likely in the Lenten season. Why do I say an annual one? Because many times you never know when people are ready to be fed. Okay? I'll tell you a story. There was, my younger brother was one of the firemen lost in the World Trade Center during September 11th. And I remember the days after, our parish stayed open with perpetual adoration. Okay? And I saw people that I knew from the neighborhood who had lost loved ones, who I had never seen darken the doorstep of the church, who walked through the door at that moment. And they continued to go to church after that, because at that moment they needed their faith, and it was the toughest time in their life. You never want to be in a position as a parish where you're not constantly inviting. Yes, in the beginning, your days of reflection may be sparsely attended. Don't stop doing them. Because everything that you do stewardship-wise, everything that you do in the parish, everything is based in the spiritual. That is what brings us and founds us in our faith. That is where people are going to turn around and become ministers in your community. That's where they're going to want to be able to be a part of your social activities, all of that. So you have to found that right there in the spiritual life of your parish. If you do this very well, the other 5 areas of strategic planning will start to grow. I guarantee you. Okay? From the liturgical standpoint, the liturgy committee should have a consistent effort to incorporate a stewardship message within the parish. Reminders of stewardship during the daily and weekly liturgy about our call to discipleship. Even on a morning mass, right? Many times the morning mass is, it was funny because this morning when the priest was celebrating, everyone sat down for the homily. And Lori and I did too. We thought there was going to be a homily because the past 2 days there was just a brief one, right? So you're not sure what's going on in each particular daily mass. But what was interesting here in doing this is even if you just said, let us take a moment of reflection to be grateful for all of the gifts that God has given to us and how we express our gratitude each day to God by serving others and being generous in our mission to the Catholic Church. That's just said at every Mass. Think about how that will come into people's lives and that it'll make them reflect and think about it. It's just simple messaging. Everyone's always looking for the big idea. There are no big ideas. Okay? The big idea is the fact that we are blessed with the Eucharist in our faith, the greatest gift ever given to man, and that is our greatest gift. If we share that with people and we consistently share it through liturgy, through spirituality, through ministry, that if we keep on talking about that will bring people closer to our churches. Monthly stewardship reflections in the bulletin help with keeping the message in front of the parishioners. Many times they'll identify or honor maybe someone who's done some tremendous work in a particular year, someone who's been a minister of a particular committee or a Eucharistic minister, someone like that who's actually had many years of service. Stopping for a couple of moments in church to say, we want to thank you for your continued stewardship commitment to your parish and how you embody the faith of Jesus Christ and bring the faith forward to others, right? Being able to do that and just honor people and do that and show the representation. The fact is we, even in our families, as we grow up, who do our children model? Who do our children model? Their parents, right? They watch from the time they're little. They watch every single thing that we do. Okay? I see my sons now, they're teenagers, right? They're in high school, and I look at them and I go, oh my gosh. I was walking behind them one day, I'm like, they walk like me, right? They walk like me. They have the same gait, right? So you want to continually model and show to people within the parish, honor people, have stewardship reflections, do a stewardship newsletter, show what the work that people are doing, communicate constantly, okay? In our music, our prayer, the faithful, all should be chosen and introduced with a message of stewardship. Think about the hymns that you're playing. What is the message in the music? Does it work in concert with what it is that we're doing and what it is that we're sharing with people? Or is it just something that we will go, oh, this week we're going to do this? All right? Think about all of those things. Now let's talk about the ministerial. This is one thing that I see all the time is that ministries are, even on the parish calendar, you're cannibalizing each other, right? People are having events at the same times. They're not making it possible for you to actually develop a calendar, having meetings on the same nights, different things of that nature, okay? Our suggestion is a ministry leader should be designated to coordinate all of the heads of each ministry. So it's basically coordinate all of the ministry heads into one group. And they meet with them quarterly to discuss the mission of the ministry as well as convey the progress and goals of the Stewardship Leadership Committee, the administration of the parish based on strategic goals. If they have a quarterly meeting with ministry heads, they could actually have the discussion, what are you planning for the next quarter or 6 months and different things. So that this way, if the Holy Name Society or the youth ministry or whoever it might be is going to have an event on a particular Saturday night, they don't plan it at the same time in a different room and split up the people that can actually be attending. You want to be able to create a sense of community. So that's the goal of parish life, right? So you want to make sure that you have a ministry leader that heads that up, holds quarterly meetings, and then therefore communicates the parish calendar, places it into the bulletin every once in a while so that this way people see it, the different events that are happening, and making sure that we're not cannibalizing our own people. Social activities. I'm just curious. What type of social activities? We've been hearing a lot about fish fries this week. What kind of social activities do your parishes have? Heard a picnic? Coffee and donuts. Is that hospitality after Mass? I'm sorry? Breakfast. Okay. Pig roast. I'm coming to that. What else? Any other big events where you bring your community together socially? Yes? A truck pull. That I have not seen. I can actually tell you that. I have not seen that. Are you having difficulty getting people to come to them? Not the truck pull. I don't think that's going to be a problem. But many parishes will complain about the fact, well, you know, we had the same event every year, year after year, and eventually your attendance declines. That's because you're not keeping it kind of fresh, what you're doing, something interesting for people to come to, something interesting to do, something different, okay? The other thing that you're not necessarily, sometimes parishes aren't thinking about, is the demographics of your parish. And you have to think about that. Social events are critical to developing a bond within the community, okay? My pastor came to myself and a group of other people a number of years ago and asked us to start a 30s and 40s club, okay? And it was to try, at that particular time, he just wanted us to kind of get young people together. On the East Coast, I think 80-90% of households are two-income households, so there's people out working all the time, so they're trying to get people to come to Mass outside of just the liturgy. So we had a 30s and 40s club where he said, the only way I want you to work it is I want you to work it in concert with youth ministry. I said, okay. He said, what I want to do is we have the gym and the auditorium. He said, in the auditorium, we're going to have a social event for those in their 30s and 40s. We're going to have, cocktails and hors d'oeuvres for just 2 hours or something like that. He said, and in the youth ministry area, in the gymnasium, we're going to have youth ministry watch their kids. Because the biggest concern that we had in our parish at that point was that people were not able to get a babysitter. That was the major obstacle to getting the 30s and 40s out. Okay? The other thing that we talk about a little bit is, does anyone know what the biggest bar night of the year is? I'm sorry? Thursday. No, I didn't mean every week of the year. Now we know where to find the three of you. No. What's the big... Today's Thursday. Lori said today's Thursday. They're ready to go. All right, so what's the biggest bar night of the year? New Year's Eve. No, not New Year's Eve, but not a bad guess. I heard Super Bowl and I heard St. Patrick's Day. Christmas? It is not. The night before Thanksgiving. Do you know why? The kids who come home from college on breaks, that's how they get together. They all hit the bar. I used to be a bartender in New York when I was going to college. The night before Thanksgiving was insane. Wall to wall, packed people, right? And I remember it was insane. So I've suggested to parishes, what you should start to do is communicate to the parents a month and a half prior to Thanksgiving saying, we're going to have a social event for your kids to come to church. Tell them to wear their college jersey, meet up with their friends, and before they go to the bar, but come to the church and actually socialize and be engaged, because what's the biggest group of people that we're losing in the church? College age. We lose them from about 18 years of age. When we can't grab them by the ear and drag them to Mass, right? Anymore in our households, we lose the college students. They go to college, they become involved in activities, different things like that. And then when do they come back to us? When they get married, or hopefully they get married first. They get married and then they have children. And that's when they return to us. But we're losing a piece of them for a significant period of time, which is very formational in their lives as young adults. It's an important time to kind of capture them. So that's why we say you should definitely have something for the different demographic groups. Seniors of the community, okay? Now, seniors usually will complain about not being able to come out at night. Well, then have day events for them. Get them together during the day, okay? Most parish plants that I've been to during the day, if you have a center like this is available, right? Why not utilize it, okay? Families with young children. We started a mom and tots group in our parish for the women that were home with their children, and they would come, and believe it or not, we generated a bunch of volunteers from it, And the mothers, really what was interesting is not only did the mothers get together with their children in the lower church, okay, but then what ended up happening is, who did they socialize with? They took their husbands out with the other couples, and you started to develop ministers out of them, right? So it actually helps to actually generate new people. One for families with high school or college children, and an empty nesters social event. You know, it's interesting, my children, I have 2 in college right now, one at Marist College, one at Notre Dame, and then I have 2 that are in a Marianist high school on Long Island, 2 boys. And within 4 years, my wife Deborah and I are going to be looking at each other going, and you are? Right? Because we've been so busy raising children. Well, guess what? That's a great group of people, demographic, to not only approach, are you an empty nester? Have your children gone off to school? Well, let's get them all together on Saturday night and in the lower church, so that this way you can have a group where they can have some refreshments, and then they can socialize, and now you can actually talk about the ministries of the parish. You do a 15-minute thing saying, folks, you know, now that we're kidding around that you're empty nesters, but if you have a little extra time, here are some things that we can invite you to be a part of, okay? All of those things would work in concert with not only socializing, but then impacting the ministerial. Fiscal and structural. So this is the area where we get the most phone calls, right? This is where, if you're in trouble, that's where they call us. Not always in trouble. Sometimes it's because you have a great vision in front of you. But this is where a lot of decision making is made, okay, in the fiscal and the structural. Fiscal and structural health is crucial to the lifeblood of any parish. Without proper, well-maintained facilities, it's difficult to serve the people through ministry, liturgy, and social activity. If you don't have some place for people to go that's inviting, right, if your structural integrity is not that strong, it's going to be difficult to actually serve. Parishes that are growing that we work with, they'll sit there and they'll say, we have a great religious education program that's growing, but we're not quite at the, you know, they're in between that phase where they have more people in religious ed, they don't necessarily have the space, and now they have to go to multiple nights in order to do it, and things like that, but they're getting close to doing a new building because they have that level of growth. So you have to think about the fact that if you don't have good facilities, it's difficult to do this, right? It's difficult to do ministry, liturgy, social activity, if you don't have space. Without proper stewardship of fiscal resources, we cannot properly provide for our parish community to grow and serve. If you are not managing fiscally well, it's going to impact everything else you do. Because once you have debt, or once you're in crisis management mode, you become paralytic. The best answer of the finance committee and the pastor that you'll ever hear after that is no. Okay? We can't do that. We can't afford it. We can't do this. You have to think about, just like any other business would be, how do we grow? We have to be if you're not growing in business, you're dying. So if your parish is not, in a sense, strategically planned to be growing, then you know that you're only going to have an attrition rate after that with regard to growth. So you have to keep that in mind, and we want to be able to fiscally manage our budget so that this way we could be proactive in ministry, proactive in liturgy. How do you identify your needs fiscally? Are we making budget? Okay. How many of you would say you're making your annual budget? Okay. How many are not? Okay. All right. That's one thing right there. If you're not making budget, you got to start asking yourself why. Now, there could be extenuating circumstances which impact that, but the fact is you got to start there and ask that question. Do we have capital needs and expenses? Because if you're not making budget, and then on top of it you're going to have capital needs and expenses, you have a bunch of things to think about, right? There's a lot of things to think about in there. Do we have the proper staffing? If your parish is just the pastor and the administrative assistant, and you really, really want a vibrant youth ministry program, it's going to be awfully tough if you don't have a staff member to run it, okay? And if it's not in your budget now, why isn't it in your budget? One of the things that's changed in capital campaigns, by the way, in previous years, and I'll talk about that a little bit, but in previous years, it used to be, well, you only do a capital campaign when you're doing something as far as building or renovation. That's not necessarily true anymore. We have done capital campaigns where part of them have been to provide additional staffing, to provide the funding for 3 years for the additional staffing till you can grow the ministry and be able to be in a position that you're capable of making that a viable ministry. What will we look like as a parish in 10 years? What do we need to invest in? Go down to your town planning board. Ask them what they look like, your zip code's going to look like, or the surrounding zip codes are going to look like in 10 years. What are you planning for? Because you know they're planning for roads, they're planning for infrastructure, they're planning for all of those different things on the town or city area. So you go down to those areas and you find out what they're planning for. Are there going to be new developments? Are there not going to be new developments? So do we see a decline in housing? What is it that we're going to see? So that this way you can prepare for it. Are we transparent in sharing our needs with the people? Yes, sir.
Question. When you look out 10 years, there's also the impact of the diocese on that 10-year vision.
Jeff, hide. No, go ahead. No.
It was a few years ago that we thought we were just going to be not a parish, not the parish center, but a satellite.
A satellite worship spot?
Kind of, they went away from that. Maybe the growth in our priests within the diocese changed or something there, but to look out that far, we weren't even
sure if you were going to be around.
Yeah, you're going to be.
Here's what I would say, and this is going to be something for every parish in the country to think about. Okay? You have to be able to discern and plan for what you're capable of controlling. Okay? If the diocese, let's just say in any diocese, if the ordinary has changed, if the bishop has changed, and he comes in with a different philosophy and different things, you can be impacted by it. That's correct. You can be. All right? Or you may sit there, and I've seen it where parishes have turned around and said, well, we don't want to do anything because I think we're going to close. And then they sit there for 10 years and don't do anything. That's insanity. Right? Go with what I would say is, if you're in that position where you feel like you're teetering in some way or you're not sure what's going to happen, plan strategically. Because here's the two things I do know, is that, number one, if you're healthy fiscally and structurally, the odds of you being closed or consolidated are 10 times smaller. If you can sit there in front of a diocesan finance council and say to them, listen, we make our budget, we have some money in the bank, we've taken care of our capital infrastructure, give us one good reason why. Now, the one good reason may be to them is, we don't have the priest personnel to serve you. Okay, we understand that that could be a challenge, right? But if I'm planning for that, and I want to keep my place viable, I'm going to plan out 10 years with the idea that I'm going to strengthen and fortify it. Because if you stand still and you don't do anything, I can guarantee you that fiscally and structurally and all those things, with that type of a concern in the parish, they're going to close us. We're just waiting for us to be closed. All that's going to happen to your collections and your structure and everything is going to go like this, and it's going to become a self-fulfilling prophecy. So my suggestion is, plan it. Go for it. Show them that you're proactive. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, when you walk into that discussion, that meeting, whether it's with the bishop or the diocesan finance council, you now are in a position to say, I understand you would like us to consolidate or close or whatever else it might be, but now you have to convince me of why, because I'm seeing this on a spreadsheet. I see us, spiritually we're really strong. We're getting people coming to Mass. Liturgically, we're having a wonderful time. People love our liturgies, right? Ministerially, we have a bunch of ministries that are happening. Fiscally, we're in good shape. Structurally, we're in good shape. Do you know what I mean? So that's the way I would look at it, okay? So I would keep that, and ultimately, you can only make yourself better. Even if you're consolidated into someone else, think of the gift you're bringing to them, of you and your parish and your mission and what you're doing and how you can have a positive impact, even if you have to be consolidated, that you could bring that to the next parish that you consolidate with and show them as a model how to become a viable, strong parish together. Right? So that's why I would continue to do this. Make sure that you're transparent in sharing your needs with the people. I was telling this story the other day, and I said, there's a pastor who he wanted to do a $3 million capital campaign. And he said to me, he says, Kevin, I have $1.5 million in the bank. I said, oh, okay. And I said, but you have $3 million in need. He said, yes. He said, but the people don't really know about it. And I said, but Father, why? He said, well, we've just managed really well. He says, and I was always afraid that if people knew that we had money in the bank, they wouldn't give, okay? Here's what you have to think about with regard to stewardship giving, okay? The parishioners giving resources to the church has nothing to do with the church's need. You understand that? It has nothing to do with the church's need. It has everything to do with the individual's need to give. Because they are giving back to God in gratitude for all the gifts that they've had. So if you bring that message to your people, if you are sitting there saying, we have $1.5 million in the bank, I say celebrate it. We're going to do a $3 million campaign. We're going to invite you to be a part in this new investment to build a brand new building and to have new resources for our children and for our families, right? And at the same time, guess what? We've been doing it so well that we are not only going to raise the $3 million, but we're still going to have $1.5 million reserve so that we continue to actually invest in ministry and continue to grow. Oh, that's a message I want to hear, right? That's a message as a parishioner I want to hear. So I always say be transparent with the people about what you're doing and where you want to be able to go, because ultimately they buy into the mission. All right, and identifying your needs. Meeting your fiscal needs requires thoughtful implementation. So you have to think about what you're doing and what you're investing in. But keep this phrase in mind. If there is no mission, there will be no money. And if there is no money, there will be no mission. They're interchangeable. If you don't have a mission as a parish, okay, it's difficult to get people excited about what it is that you're doing and inviting them into the process of being a true steward in your parish, of being invested in what you're trying to do as a community. Okay? If there's no money, you can't put forward a mission. So they're interchangeable. So you need to be able to make sure that you're thinking about this, that we have a mission that people can invest in, and they can see that when they give their gifts gratefully, that you're utilizing them well as good stewards. So before embarking on any strategic fundraising activities, the financial, it's critical for the Parish and Finance Pastoral Council, in concert with the Stewardship Committee, to reflect on long and short-term needs. If you're thinking about doing any types of fundraising, you want to ask yourself, why do you want to host or create a fundraising opportunity? Is it crisis management? What is it? What's the reason why you want to do it? All right? What immediate needs will this fulfill? Why is this in our strategic plan to do this fundraiser? Okay, what immediate needs will it fulfill? Will this opportunity interfere with other parish activities? Are you just nickel and diming people all over the place and not having a strategic plan for how you're inviting them to give to different things? And keeping in mind that some of these activities, when you sit there and you say, how do you plan on making this an opportunity a success? What is your definition of success? I'll have this conversation many times with business managers, and they'll say, well, we had a parish fair. I said, was it successful? They go, yeah, it was successful. I said, what was your definition of success? Well, we raised $15,000. I said, what was your goal? Well, we didn't set one. Then how do you know if it was successful? You didn't identify success in everything you do. When you do a ministry fair, or you talk about trying to get more people engaged in ministry, you want to be able to say, what are our definitions of success? What do we see as us being successful? What is it we're trying to engage in? And how does this opportunity fit into your short-term and long-term plans? 2 to 3 years versus 5 to 10. Is this something that's going to be perpetual? Is it a one-time thing? How is it that we're going to implement it? So here's all different types of fundraising, types of initiatives that I've seen in parishes. All right? Event fundraising, stewardship initiatives, increased offertory. These two are separated on purpose. Does anyone believe for 1 minute that these are the same things? All right, don't answer it yet. We'll get to that. I'll tell you what the difference is. Capital fundraising and endowment campaigns, and planned giving. So these are all different methodologies and ways to help you from a fundraising perspective. Event fundraising. All right, event fundraising usually centers around following activities: golf outings, fashion shows, silent and live auctions, Powerball raffles. What other things do you do? The truck pull. How much did this truck pull actually raise?
Oh gosh, about $49,000.
How many participants do you get in it?
This year there were 93 callers.
93 pullers. Really? How many people come out for this? Thousands of people come out. Please leave the address before you leave. I got to come. All right. What other things do you do? What other activities? I'm sorry? Sports banquet.
Gambling and drinking.
Gambling and drinking. If anyone's going to switch parishes, this is the time to do it. Right. Okay. Well, here's the thing about, and to go to the point of the truck pull, your number, watch this. Event fundraising is traditionally labor intensive, right? It's a lot of work. It usually yields anywhere from $10,000 to $50,000 worth of revenue for a parish community in your budgets. Great social interaction, great engagement of people within the parish. People come out for it because it's exciting, but you also have to be careful of what? What do you got to be careful of? Exhausting your volunteers, okay? If you have an event that's so exhaustive that they get done with it and you can't talk to them for 2 more months, that could be troubling, okay? The truck pull apparently is like that there, so it's the fumes. But event fundraising can be a good spirit exercise, building exercise for a parish. This is where, and here's the thing I would say, is if you're doing event fundraising, if you're having social activities, ask your stewards within your parish to invite someone that they know hasn't been to an event to come with you, okay, to come to the event. Because spirit building exercises are the way that people get involved. Hey, I had a great time at that event. What else do you do over there? Okay, so it's great that our core people show up, but if we're not extending our arms out and inviting, then we're only limiting our potential. Okay, it's usually oriented towards fulfilling a short-term need or a small part of an annual budget. Let me guess, the truck pull is on the annual budget line? Is it something that you look forward to every year? It is. So it's in your budget for the year. So depending upon how it does is how well the budget is impacted by it.
Actually, no, because we do it through events and bonus, so it's,
Their budget's not dependent.
it's not.
Their budget. Wow. Father has more information than I thought. Okay. All right. Now, let's talk about stewardship initiatives. And I'm going to talk about this because many times, you know, one of the things that Lori brought up when she was doing the pastoral letter was, she said, when we use the word stewardship, what's the first thing that people say? Money. Do you know why that is? Do you know who ruined the word stewardship? I'm part of this community, unfortunately. All right? Consultants. We ruined it. When 1992, when the bishop's pastoral letter came out, by the way, I didn't start my business until 1994, so I wasn't one of these guys. But what consultants saw was an opportunity to take an increased offertory, wrap it up in stewardship wording, and deliver it out to your parishes. Okay? And they made a lot of money doing it. But what happened was it missed what stewardship was all about. Because stewardship is based in the spiritual, not in the financial. Okay? The financial is a result of the expression of stewardship, not the core founding of the expression of stewardship. Okay? So that's why a fully active stewardship parish educates the parish community regularly about the needs of the community, ranging from spiritual enrichment, ministry enhancement, okay, and the treasure commitment needs of the parish. It talks about spirituality first. This is an ongoing annual process which requires the commitment of the pastor first. Pastors who are in the room, if you want to be a stewardship parish, you have to commit yourself first to stewardship before you can invite your staff, your parish leaders, all of the people within your parish to be a part of it. Okay? And that this is not a one-time fix-it approach. You're going to annually renew that particular process and invite people because everyone's stewardship commitments will change as their life changes, okay? Whether ministerial commitments, financial commitments, spiritual commitments, based on what they're able to do. Stewardship initiatives do not meet short-term needs, but rather meet the ongoing and eventual needs of the parish, all right? It has to be something that's strategic that you're looking at from a stewardship perspective. There was one woman yesterday who was at the seminar in Eau Claire, and she actually said, what we should be doing as a stewardship parish now is actually tithing some of our resources to a ministry that we support elsewhere as a parish community, tithing outward. And there are parishes that do that. Up to 10% of their income goes to support missions in different places around the world. When assessing the fulfillment of the treasure program, because I know that when we talk about it from the financial component, the parish should be able to meet their operating costs and minor capital expenditures from your stewardship, okay, your financial stewardship. The treasure component, if you haven't really initiated stewardship in your parishes, what we find is that the first year, when you get people on fire about stewardship, that you usually see an increase of about 20 to 40% within the first year, and eventual progress with the annual renewals, that you should see an approximately 10% increase on the financial side. You should also then be setting goals for yourself on the ministerial side. What things do we want to accomplish this year with our stewardship renewal? What things do we want to do with regard to spiritual reflection for our stewardship renewal? If you make it just about money, that's what people are going to respond to, okay? Just about it being financial. If you want to be actually building stewards, then you have to be able to do something in your renewal that's spiritual, that's ministerial, and financial. You have to do all three. Okay? And that's really where you're going to found it, and you're going to see the difference in the conversion process of your parishioners. Increased offertory. There'll be pastors who call my office and they'll say, Kevin, can you do an increased offertory for us? And I kind of cringe. Do we do increased offertory programs for them? Yes, if they're in a pinch. Okay? If they're really in a pinch, that there's a crisis management situation. That's where I see increased offertory. Increased offertory programs go like this. You do the increased offertory, you ask people to give a little bit more, it goes up like this, and about 12 to 18 months later, it goes right back down. Okay? Why is that? Think about it from a stewardship perspective. Okay? You are asking people for money for the parish. You're saying to them, you need to give us money. You're not asking them to give in gratitude back to God for all the gifts that they've had in their life. Okay? It's a different type of a kind of position for parishioners to be receiving. Increased offertory pretty much helps to meet an immediate financial concern, but they do not enhance the spiritual development or ministries of the parish. And from the fact of increased offertory, within the traditional stewardship model, an annual renewal process is implemented, rarely successful in an increased offertory model. Okay? So you want to be able to be looking at stewardship much more than increased offertory as a long-term plan. Capital and endowment campaigns. This is usually oriented towards meeting maintenance, refurbishment, renovation, building needs of the parishes. When should they be considered? When you start to get to the point that your capital needs are greater than 15% of your annual budget. Why is that the case? Well, if you know that on an annual renewal process, you're only going to receive approximately 10% in the annual renewals of stewardship, this is above and beyond that, to 15%. And if you're doing an increased offertory, or you had an increased offertory at any point, that's usually going to wane off as well. So once you start to see that your capital needs are more than 15% of your operating budget, and you're not going to be able to put that as a budget line in your budget for the annual purposes, then you should start thinking about when and if and when you should be considering a capital appeal. All right, in order to assess the need for a capital campaign, a parish should review short and long-term needs. Roof replacement, boilers, windows, liturgical restoration, renovation, ministry, meeting space, all of these different things should be reviewed. I was actually at a parish last night right here in this diocese where originally when I started talking to them, they said, oh, we want to raise $500,000. And I said, well, what's your offertory? And I'll talk to you about the formulas. But they have the capacity to raise $1.5 million. Why would you go out to the people and raise $500,000 if you know that they have the capacity to raise $1.5 million? Look at your entire parish plan. Look at everything that you're doing. Look at how it impacts your strategic plan for the next 3 to 5 years. And then invite people to something more comprehensive. Okay? So you want to be able to take a look at your entire parish plan when looking at this. Capital campaigns are traditionally capable of raising 2 to 5 times your annual offertory. Okay? And that's excluding Christmas and Easter. So you keep this in mind. If you have a $10,000 a week offertory, 50 weeks a year, that's $500,000, right? Times it by 3, that's, 2 rather, that's $1 million. Times it by 5, it's $2.5 million. That's the range of capacity that parishes have. There are standard formulas for assessing them. So for instance, in this particular parish, their ordinary income was $800,000. They had 3,600 registered families. We anticipated 900 to 1,200 pledges to this campaign. I would love to tell you that all 3,600 registered parishioners will graciously, generously, and anxiously and enthusiastically give you a pledge, okay? But that's not the case. Participation rates towards capital campaigns will range based on where you are in the country. If you're in the Northeast, it's approximately 23 to 30% of parishes will give to a capital campaign. Parishioners will give to a capital campaign. In the Midwest, it's more like 33% into the mid-40s. All right? So it depends on the particular parish and where you're at. You got to keep this in mind, that right now, at the role and place that you're in right now, these other 2,400 families, they're what my Irish Catholic mother would call Cape Catholics. Christmas, Ash Wednesday, Palm Sunday, Easter, okay? Sacramental Catholics. They are on the registry for the purposes of their sacraments and different things like that. We have not engaged them, or they have not come into church, so keep this in mind. If someone has already made the decision that on Sundays they are going to pass by the church where they could come in and receive the greatest gift ever given to man, and they've made that decision in their life, the odds of them coming in and giving to your capital campaign are very, very small. Okay? You need to evangelize and get out and get them engaged before they would be a part of it. So in this particular case, this parish had the capacity to raise $1.6 to $4 million. Now, if for some reason your capital campaigns have the capacity to raise, let's say, $1.5 million, and you only need $700,000, we suggest putting in endowments into your campaign case statement, reserve funds, things like this, so that this way you fortify and maximize your campaign case statement, so that this way you go out to the people once to ask strategically what you need for the next 3, 5, or 7 years. Ask once, ask well. Okay? It helps us get rid of that nickel and diming that we're doing to people. It helps them to graciously and prayerfully and reflectively think about what it is that they're giving to the parish, and to do so in gratitude to God, and then ultimately helping the mission of your strategic plan. Okay? Plan giving. Does anyone in any of their parishes do you talk about plan giving? Okay. Anyone? No? Does everyone know what plan giving is? All right. Well, plan giving is an opportunity for people to actually give through their wills, estates, estate plannings, many times making a bequest, a charitable gift annuity. This is really when you start to talk about end-of-life issues with parishioners, and that they can then turn around and leave a legacy to the church. I find this incredible in the Catholic Church, that for a people who believe in resurrection, we sure hate talking about death. Why is that? We don't want to talk to our parishioners about the fact that something that's going to happen to every single one of us. We're all going to hopefully cross that border into the kingdom of God and be able to be a part of our heavenly kingdom. We know that that's part of our future. Why is it difficult for us to actually talk with our parishioners about the fact that that's in their future, and how they may be able to, in their passing, leave a legacy gift that could help with the strategic future of our parishes? Okay? One woman I was talking to, she turned around and she had an estate of approximately just under $1 million with the sale of her house. And she said to me, she says, but I need to leave my money to my children. And I said, it's very simple. Your children will survive on 95% of your estate, just as they will on 100% of your estate. But you have the opportunity to give a gift to your parish of 5% of your estate, so that this way it could help with the mission in the future, which would be so gratefully appreciated by your parish. If you have not started to talk about planned giving in your parishes, you must. And the reason why I say this is the greatest generation of donors is either retiring or passing right now. And those resources will be gone. I can tell you that their colleges are asking them for it, their high schools are asking them for it, other nonprofits are asking them to consider planned gifts. And if you don't ask them for them, those gifts that should be a great invitation to your parish will be gone and gone to someone else. So please don't hesitate to do that. I'm sure that Jeff's office could assist you with planned giving with regard to implementing a program. You usually have seminars for them similar to this, and they are given the opportunity in your parish to invite people to do you invite someone like Jeff up to give a presentation on planned giving, and he will then speak to people within your parish and give them an opportunity to start that conversation. It's a little bit longer conversation because they have to look at their estate, they have to talk to their attorney, so initiating the conversation as soon as possible is critical to your success. But in summary, one of the things that I hope that you get out of today is this. So 2 things. Number 1, that if you found everything that you can do in stewardship and think about it from the standpoint of the spiritual basis of stewardship, that you will be successful as a parish. But you're only going to be successful is if you develop the gifts that you've received responsibly, create a strategic plan that makes it possible for your parish to really look at where it's going in the next 3, 5, and 10 years. Okay? I'm going to take some questions if you'd like to ask some questions, and then after that we're going to break for lunch, and then after lunch we're going to have a little bit of a working workshop to help you start to develop some thought processes for your strategic plan. Okay? Questions? Yes, sir.
One question, wouldn't it be ideal from the diocesan end to actually encourage every parish to have an endowment so that when you do ask the planned giving, even though it's a small little parish with 100 parishioners, somebody's got $2 million to give you, I'll guarantee that. Doesn't matter where it is. But if it goes into your operating budget, then you have no money left because you have to use it in your operations by law. It has to go to that endowment.
So this is a great question, because one of the things that we did do in the Twin Cities, because many of the parishes that were doing capital campaigns were concerned about those parishes being sued due to claims that were against those parishes, we had the parishes set up separate 501c foundations, legacy societies basically, that provided the opportunity for not only to receive the gifts for the capital campaign, but then to also develop a legacy society for planned giving, and that's where that would remain. And it's to the benefit of the parish and could be distributed according to the board members of that foundation. Okay? So that's a great way to kind of create that separate foundation for the parish. It's a great way to protect you from any legal potential problems that could come out if someone came out and said, 15 years ago there was an incident and you're going to be legally implicated. Then that's a good way to to put funds. Did I say that? Protect those resources. But it's a nice way. And then not only that, but many parishes, and what we suggest to our clients is then you create in that foundation, you create a legacy society, that the idea that monies are utilized and that the interest off of that foundation's distribution every single year can be given as a distribution to the parish for operating or towards any special projects that you'd like to do. But it keeps that principle intact for the purposes and the benefit of your parish. Other questions? Yes?
You talked about the spiritual underpinnings of stewardship versus just an increased offertory component. And in previous parishes that I've served in, we focused on tithing as part of that spirituality of stewardship. Can you say, you mentioned tithing a couple times in your talk, but can you say anything about that? Do you work with tithing when you do, the stewardship?
So there's different approaches, Father, to it. Okay. In the stewardship model, if you're looking at a stewardship model that the ICSC kind of puts forward, it's the idea that 5%, you're still giving 10% to charity, but 5% goes to your parish for operating purposes, and then 5% goes to other charities and organizations, so gifts to the appeal, any other things that they support. So they're still giving 10%, but the way that presentation is for stewardship giving is to turn around and to kind of do it where it's taking in mind that people are giving other resources to other charities, okay? Or you could actually go into a tithing model, which is asking people for a full 10% to your church. And that is scriptural, right? So that is founded in Scripture. So you could actually present either model to your parishioners. But it's a matter of choice and culture. It's been a little bit more challenging, I think, in Catholic parishes because the average Catholic gives less than 1% of their income to churches. So part of the reason why in the from the Stewardship Council, why they developed that kind of 5 and 5 model was because it takes people along on a journey and takes them stepping it up over time, where a tithing model immediately goes out and asks them for 10%. So that's probably what I would say from the implementation standpoint. The spiritual implementation is the same scripturally, but the implementation of the program would be different because you're going and taking people that may be giving 1% of their income to giving 10% of their income. And although it's correct scripturally, they still might want to, if they go from that particular point that quickly, they might want to have father incarcerated. No, but you know, it's just a big jump for them, you know.
I've always used the 5 and 5 approach.
Oh, you have? Okay.
Yeah, but I found in some parishes it was a hard sell.
The 5 and 5?
Well, just the idea of tithing itself.
Yeah.
They wanted to know, what does it cost to run the operation, and basically send me a bill for it. You know, let me know how much money you need, Father.
But do you know why people think like that? Because that's how the Catholic Church has trained them. Let's face it, 40, 50 years ago, our churches were filled, right? There were plenty of people in the pew, and if everyone dropped $1 or $2 in the basket, we made our nut, we were able to pay our bills, right? And we didn't teach people. We really didn't train people scripturally about giving. Where in the evangelical church, right, in churches, and in the Mormon church, they've been doing that for decades. And that's been one, and keeping in mind that, you know, the Catholic Church very much was an immigrant church, you know, and they always wanted to have the idea that no matter what, you're always welcome through the doors. They didn't want to have anything monetary associated with the service and the invitation to Jesus Christ. But in doing that, they still didn't, or, you know, we as a church didn't teach in Scripture what was in Scripture to those who could, you know, participate. And that's where we lost it, you know, and that's where over the years, and all of a sudden, when our attendance went from here to here, again, a reactive church rather than a proactive church. A reactive church was, oh, what do we do now? Right? And that's where you started to go back to, but now it's going to take, quite frankly, it's going to take generations of just talking about it consistently and training and teaching and talking to people and inviting them to a lifestyle of stewardship. That's going to have to be generational. We're going to have to teach this generation to train the next generation. So it's going to take some time. It's not going to happen overnight. Other questions? Yes, sir.
To inform the people of what's going on in the parish, you say we put it in the bulletin, and very few read it. Is there a time that is appropriate to be informing them from the pulpit?
Yes. You can always pick a time in even if it's just before the procession, right? If it's just before the procession and Mass starts at 11, take 5 minutes. And if you want to have a speaker come up and say, ladies and gentlemen, just want to keep you up to date as some of our strategic plans are concerned. This is what we're doing as a parish community, etc., etc. What's interesting is in the Latino culture, they come to Mass, they stay all day, right? You don't have a time limit. It's the Anglo culture that's looking at the watch going, Father's going a little long today, all right? You know, so it's the white families that are like that. But what I would do is I'd probably do it at the front side. Unfortunately, we've gotten into a habit in America that after we receive the Eucharist, we think that's kind of like the keys to our car. And we run out the door and we head out before the actual conclusion of Mass, all right? So we try not to do too much after communion. It's interesting that for years we've had the announcements after communion, and half of our people don't hear them. Okay? But here's just the idea of doing this, the insanity thing, the same thing over and over. Nobody's changing it. Right? Nobody's changing it. We still have the announcements at the end of Mass. Well, if everyone comes in the front door at a certain time, or if you want to, even still, you know, liturgically, obviously, some of the priests and the bishops have different ideas as to where you can put announcements in the liturgy. But if you actually have a homily after the gospel and you want to just share a few moments before you go on to the consecration, all right, I don't think it's a terrible thing to say, ladies and gentlemen, we just wanted to keep you updated. Because guess what? They're there right then. We kid around from a development standpoint, because we do campaigns for schools and hospitals and all these different institutions. Those campaigns are different than parish campaigns. Parish campaigns, the staff kids around, it's like shooting fish in a barrel, because everyone's at church, right? A lot of the people that we want to talk to are at church. If you don't take that opportunity to talk to them right there, then you're missing that opportunity. So I would say, where do you see a place, whether it's just before the liturgy begins, that you can actually communicate with people, okay?
The other thing too is that if it is appropriate to connect that gospel reading to the strategic plan or to the stewardship or to whatever it is that you want to connect.
That always helps. If the gospel, pastors will kid around with us sometimes when we're doing campaigns and go, we have a good gospel this weekend for this, right? We have a good gospel. But the gospel's there to be preached, and the fact that we can actually, utilize what's been shared in the gospel to only further show the people, right, what it is that we're doing in our parish life that's in concert with the gospel, that's a great thing.
How do you reach the people that are not?
Ha! The ultimate question that we get every single time we do the seminar, okay? How do you get the people who are not coming out to Mass? I am going to share this very, very simply with you, because the fact is we've been sitting inside of our parish offices for way too long. Priests and lay staff and lay people as well, okay? The only way to get people to come to Mass is to personally invite them and to get them engaged in your parish. Jesus Christ sent out the disciples 2 by 2. We're afraid to do that in the Catholic Church today. And our fear, all right, our fear is preventing us from sharing our faith. So I'm a big advocate for developing evangelization teams that literally take the quadrants of your parish, build them out, and actually go through a process of twice a year going out to visit those individuals. And what's the greatest tracking mechanism that we have in the Catholic Church? The envelope, right? So we know who's attending Mass or who's not attending Mass, for the most part, right? So I would take the list of those individuals who are not using their envelopes, and I'd send out evangelization teams with information about what things are taking place within the parish. We wanted to just stop by and invite you to Mass this weekend. We wanted to stop by and tell you about the different events that we're going to be having. And it's only going to be what I call Chinese water torture, okay? Till it permeates the skull, all right, and touches the heart.
Can I just add to that too? A few years ago in our diocese, we had a movement. It was called Belong More Deeply. And part of that process, I was talking about this at the break with one of the fathers. Part of that process was the first step to ignite the people in the pews, because oftentimes we think that they're already ignited. So we took a nice chunk of time to work with people in the pews, get them really excited. The next step was then to go out. So we just want to take care of the people, feed the people that are there in the pews, excite them to then go out and share their faith and their joy to bring someone along with them back.
Other questions? Any other questions? No? All right, so we're going to take a little break for lunch. We're going to feed ourselves. And then when we come back in about 45 minutes or so, we're a little ahead of schedule, which is good, right? Are we ahead? Yeah. So hopefully we'll do the workshop and we can get you home a little bit early. But what we're going to do is take you through a workshop this afternoon, myself and Lori, that's going to help you to start to identify. We're going to give you a strategic planning tool to bring back with you to your parish, okay? And to utilize for your pastoral councils, your finance councils, your stewardship councils. And we're going to go through a process here and show you how to utilize it so you can bring it back home and actually utilize that tool with the rest of your parish, okay? Thank you all very much.